All right, we are on to rep number 4, and we're looking at rep number 4. We have the design pattern of Egypt. Now, Egypt is a ton to read. I put it in the notes if you want to read it. Like if you're unfamiliar with the Bible, I never want to assume that people who read this or who watch this podcast either know the Lord or already know the Lord. So I wanted to provide some context for Egypt, but it's a lot to read. So we're not going to read all of it. But because most of us have a familiarity with most believers have a familiarity with Egypt, in that the Lord, they were enslaved to Egypt, and then the Lord brought them out. So chapter 1 talks about how they got enslaved. Chapter 14 talks about how they brought them out. So we know that that's what's going on with Egypt. So Egypt, slavery, and you got delivered from it. You with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is Egypt when you think of the setting of Egypt, what comes to your mind? Slavery.
Yeah, slavery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Being pushed down and oppressed. Mm-hmm. So is Egypt overall a good thing? When you think of that main theme, when you think of just that right there, okay?
Yeah, no.
No.
Just from that right there. Now there is deliverance from Egypt, but so let's read. We're going to read 4, and we're going to continue to expound on that. So, Adrian, you want to read Exodus 16, 1 through 3, and then the verses after that one? I don't have page numbers on it. My bad.
All right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exodus 16, 1 through 3. Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. So the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin. I don't know if I've read this. Yep. Just straight up, the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." My goodness.
I mean,
y'all been out for 4 days and y'all starving to death. Yeah. All right. Numbers 11, 1 through 6. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger was aroused. Then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. When the people cried out to Moses, he prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So that place was called Taberah, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. The rabble with them began to crave other food. And again, the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna." Now there was a famine in the land.
Genesis 12, 10 to 13.
And Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you."
All right. So after reading those verses, how does that keep filling out Egypt?
Yeah, it is. I feel like a perspective thing now, because they say if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. So these people, this bondage of Egypt, I guess in Exodus, is so enticing. So there were things that they received in Egypt. Mm-hmm. Egypt did have, like, they go on to name, they start naming all kind of food. They're like, we had meat and cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlics and greens, beans, tomatoes. And they're like, we don't get none of that food out here. We get this manna. Yeah. And even though it's bread from heaven, it's like their appetites had become accustomed to what was in Egypt. Mm-hmm. So this seems to be a place that was rich in something. Yeah. Rich in material wealth, rich in like land, like rich in possessions and things. however, very deprived of the Spirit of the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And the compassion and the love of the Lord. But then, and I think that is affirmed even more when Abram is like, listen, they're going to try to take you, girl, and they're going to kill me.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't look like it's a safe place.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a place that's ruled by hard people who find their authority in what they have.
Yep.
That's good.
So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna add. It seems to me like Egypt kind of represents where you can fulfill your own desires apart from the Lord, because they're trying to fill their stomachs.
Yeah.
With certain type of foods that they're not necessarily getting by the Lord right now.
Yep.
And then when Abram is, mentions Egypt, it's like the people are going to get his wife because they want to fulfill their selfish desires. And so Israel seems to be doing the same thing. I just want to get what I want to get.
Yeah.
Even though the Lord is clearly satisfying them with manna, it's like, well, I want this is my selfish desire, and it can be fulfilled back in Egypt. Even though I got all this slavery, I would rather be in bondage because I get to fulfill this selfish desire.
It makes me think about verse 5 where they say we remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost.
Yeah.
And it costs you your life.
I was like, at that point,
it appears to be no cost.
It appears to be no cost.
Which
is as a, what is the word?
Israelite?
No, what we're doing, what is this called? Design pattern. I keep wanting to call it a symbol.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. But as a design pattern, like we see, I don't know what I was going to say because I was trying to remember. But basically.
With the fish.
Well, no, not the fish, just Egypt as being that place, or them where they're talking about Egypt at no cost, and how we see come into the New Testament how sin has a cost, and you get these things, you get cucumbers and melons, maybe appearingly more like
this is so good.
Cake,
and
ice cream,
Yeah. So if I were to summarize that, Egypt is the place you go to get your desires met.
Yeah.
Didn't have that perspective. But it's very clear as you say that. But I think the reason why they're getting their desires met is because Egypt, if you look at each one of these, is a place you go when things get tough. When they set out to the desert of sin, in the desert they grumbled against Moses, and they were thirsty right before this chapter, if I'm not mistaken, and they had everything they could eat. It got hard in the wilderness. In Numbers chapter 11, the people complain about their hardships. So Egypt is where you go when things get hard. Genesis chapter 12, now there was a famine in the land. Egypt is where you go when things get hard. You get your desires met, but there's always a cost. Does anything good happen when people go to Egypt?
No.
So just keep that in. Whenever you see Egypt in the Bible, it's like, wait a second.
Yeah.
It's not good. Partnerships, it's rough, and so that's just a key thing. So Egypt is all through this Bible, and it's good to have that context. Like just reading it, it's going to give you an extra layer.
Is it also like going back to what's familiar?
That was my thought too.
Yeah, because they were going to a new place, traveling, to new places and. Experiencing this change, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, when you said when it gets hard, let me go back to what I've known, even though it was bondage. Let me go back to it.
I would agree with that. It's a place that's familiar. It's a place where the Spirit of God isn't, though. You just don't want to go back there. So it's good stuff. And so now we'll move on to, if we have time, we'll go and we'll talk about the East. I'll leave it in here because that's a really good design pattern as well. Maybe you can do it on your own. But now we're going to get to the point. We're going to go to some reps where we are identifying the plot conflicts, and we are and we're getting the meaning. And all these design patterns that we've done, we'll start using them. So all those are coming up in the next couple of reps.